So today I want to show you the 5 pipeline categories that I have in all of my code bases that I think are really representative of a solid foundation of what it means to start to have agentic pipelines. So with that, let's get into it. So before we get into this, I do want to note that I'm not a huge fan of the idea that there's 5 pipelines or something like that are like the God pipelines or the perfect pipelines. Primarily, YouTube rewards like clean things. I think that every project is going to be slightly different. I just basically took an example project that I was working on. Like here's one where I was doing some audit stuff, and as well as a variety of other pipelines. I actually probably need to clean that up because if I'm ever going to have everyone else looking, it needs to get a lot cleaner. And then what I did was basically said, okay, summarize the categories of pipelines I'm working to into like broad pipeline categories or types, right? And it came up with 5. But the reality of it is I think that's more of a starting point, and there's probably tons of other pipelines that we're going to be working in. So this is actually hard to read, but the 5 that we're going to talk about: surface area pipelines, change type pipelines, failure mode pipelines, integration pipelines, and confidence pipelines. Once again, this is a first attempt at starting to take some of this and turn it into more of a set of categories of pipelines that you can work on. And I really want to primarily focus on the surface area pipelines for the most part in this video, but we can talk about the rest too. Some of the testing stuff's cool. Some of the flaky stuff is cool. So what specifically is the reason why you want like pipelines or categories of pipelines? The core of it is that I think my experience with AI is that AI is very unpredictable in how it fails. But then once it fails, fails in very predictable ways. And what I mean by that is that when you're doing software development on a project, generally speaking, what you will find is that the same mistakes show up over and over again. And when you are fighting that, you have your deterministic tools like policy as code, all your test automation using like your own SDK and starting to force it at the architecture level. But then also you can use all the AI tools, right? Like your rules, your skills, etc. And in this case, agentic pipelines. And so what that looks like is basically bespoke pipelines designed to look for those areas of drift. And what you'll find is that then in different parts of the system, have different loops that are a lot more strict, looking for specific areas of drift that basically have what I call managers, but other people call a variety of other things, basically specifically designed to look for drift very closely. And then in areas that I know it struggles with, I have like bespoke pipelines around that. So that's what we're going to talk about is like, what are the categories of these pipelines? So the first is surface area pipelines. What is a surface area pipeline? A surface area pipeline to me is basically anytime you're doing development in a specific surface area, let's call it, of your app, and you have a pipeline designed specifically to that surface area of the app. And so the example that I pulled out of my code base here was when we are adding a sort of settings toggles to apps. So this code base that I was working in, basically what it does is we have this sort of like menu system where different apps can pull in different settings pages. And then we can add additional settings pages. So when you're doing development on that, it's a very rigid kind of development when you're trying to add settings pages to an app. And so what we have is a whole pipeline specifically designed around anytime that a developer wants to add new settings to an app from our shared modules and the menu settings, or they want to customize it, they basically use this pipeline because not only does it have all of the relevant docs linked and stuff like that, it also has a loop specifically designed around looking for the specific things that we have seen fail in the past, and then basically getting in front of those areas. That's hard to read the code, so I'll just give an example. So you have your CLI kickoff, right? This pipeline has a research phase, which spits out a research doc. It then has an implementation phase based on that. It then has a review phase based on that as well. Now, I don't know why the loops aren't showing in this mermaid doc. I'll have to look through that because normally in any one of these steps, you have basically a manager step that goes back and does the review. And in my prep with these mermaid docs, I don't know what's going on there. But in short, the point of this is that you'll end up with, in theory, dozens of different surface area pipelines. A surface area pipeline specifically, once again, is designed for optimizing development in a specific portion of your app or around a specific feature or something like that you've seen AI mess from. So like in our development, we have one for settings. We have one for anytime we're doing our shared module work. We have one for the loop UI component. We have one for interacting with policy as code. And it's generally speaking what we call like surface area pipelines. Okay. Next is change type pipelines. So this is primarily related to pipelines designed around types of changes that you're making. It's worth noting that it's a blurry area between a change type pipeline and a surface area pipeline because like they do very similar things. But I think that when we were trying to summarize this, and there's enough difference in terms of some of the refactor stuff that's different than like new development on the surface area and trying to refactor stuff. And so we have different pipelines specifically designed around the changing of data and what that process looks like. You can see the mermaid for one of our examples, which is what pipeline was this? Let me go look at the example. Give me 1 second. Okay, yeah, so this was renaming public symbol. And the pipeline is specifically designed to first locate everything. It then produces a doc. It has the name and depreciation, commits, migrates everything. And then basically after the commit, there is a deterministic gate that the pipeline has where it basically refuses the output if it doesn't like it, or it drops the alias and does a commit and ready to merge. Same thing. I'm not sure why the manager loops are not showing in here. And I wonder if that didn't get added. That's not critical for these just because they're not really related to the category pipelines, but I do want to just note that it is a gap. All right, last couple failure mode pipelines, basically looking for how things break and then double checking those. In short, this pipeline is designed to force sort of your work through diagnostic steps that you would do in order to catch failures. These are oftentimes related to issues that you've seen come up repeatedly that even get through the pipelines. And so we have a handful of pipelines. I would say right now we only have a couple based on this. I don't think that these are super prevalent. First step, reproduce. Then you have a verdict. If you haven't reproduced it, stops the pipeline. If you have reproduced it, diagnose, right? Pattern confirmed, fix, resolve, right? Failure mode pipelines. Integration pipelines. We have this one. It's actually quite useful. So anytime we're doing integrations, more and more, we're starting to try to build pipelines around it. Basically, first step is scaffolding the required parts, doing a commit, doing a review. But then the other thing that's really interesting is we also are starting to have the pipelines do a lot of Google searching in terms of basically looking for the docs and pulling in the most relevant aspects of the docs. So obviously integrations rely on third-party things. And so one of the benefits of Claude Code is that it has Google. And so one of the first steps when it's doing research is basically looking up what are the changes in the docs? Are the docs still relevant? Stuff like that. And so it's a useful pipeline in that sense. And then the last is what confidence pipelines. I would also call this like testing, stuff like that. But in short, basically the pipelines don't ship features, they work on tests. Now we have more of a TDD style approach in many ways where we're trying to build our test automation as part of our other pipelines. In other organizations, a handful that I've talked to you about this, they don't really want that. They want like end-to-end tests produced at the end. And so this pipeline basically pulls in a report or commit or whatever it's going to pull in, and then it basically goes through the process of writing those tests. So very straightforward one. So I have example pipelines here. I don't know that you're going to be able to really understand them. Let me try to find like an example. Build scaffold prompt. I think what I'll actually do, as I'm thinking about this, is I'll probably do a video specifically just going through one of these example pipelines, given that this video is more about the categories of pipelines that you should have. And so I'll probably do a follow-up video specifically around like going through one of these example pipelines, if that's helpful. I will once again call out, I think there's probably a ton more categories. This was a first attempt at trying to break the categories out. I like them, but I'm not 100% thrilled by them. And so I'll probably release in the next few weeks an updated version of what are the different pipeline categories. As people are starting to play with this, I'd love your feedback on what you think is the correct ways of doing these categories. What is the correct scope of a pipeline and so forth. Once again, I want these videos to not be a statement of how it has to be, but instead a sort of inspiration point for you to get started. And so, yeah, please drop any comments, thoughts, concerns, anything else that you guys have that you want me to go through. With that, I do want to note, I really appreciate all the new followers and subscribers. It's been awesome. If you want to see more of my content, you can check me out on Ben Fellows on LinkedIn. I am trying to get X up and going, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And a couple other social media platforms are going. And then we are discussing a newsletter that sort of categorizes some of this stuff too, as well as just other framework stuff that we find interesting that we might release in the next like week or so. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah, with that, these are the 5 categories of pipelines that you should be using in your project. All right, talk soon. See ya.